Hello everyone. Today I thought it would be nice to walk through my process of creating my first ever mural. I'm a multimedia artist living in the Sonoran Desert, and I primarily work with colored pencils, markers, and paint on a variety of different surfaces, but I also write poems and short stories, I take photos, and I make complex composite photographs. I do a little bit of everything that might interest me creatively in that particular moment. It's always been a goal of mine to create a mural and work at a scale much larger than I have ever done before, so I decided that in my 30th year on this planet, that would be the first big art thing that I did.
I think it's 15 by 12, but, or maybe not, maybe it's...
Oh, it's still folded a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I had it the wrong way.
While you watched me struggle here to set up a tarp for the first time, I thought I'd walk through my initial plan. I got to the site in the early afternoon to begin setting up and testing out the equipment I was going to be using. I wanted to make sure everything was in place when the sun went down to maximize the amount of nighttime that I had to paint. My goal was to get all of the white sections mapped out so that I didn't have to rely on the projector the next day and could just paint using my reference. The next day I planned to begin blocking out the black areas, adding the black line details between the white areas, and then adding the black and white details inside and outside of the larger white areas. That's a lot. It'll make sense when you see everything mapped out on the wall. I wanted to be able to arrive on a Thursday afternoon and leave Saturday afternoon with everything done. I knew to do this I'd have to work until around midnight every day and then wake up early to start again the next day to really maximize all of the time that I had available. When I was preparing to do this mural, I watched some other videos on YouTube that used either the projector method or drew large abstract brushstrokes across the surface, and then you take a picture, map it to their illustration, create some kind of grid, and then follow it square by square to transfer the image from your digital device onto the bigger mural picture. I think that would have been a great method if you were forced to work during the daytime only, but having never worked at this scale before, I wanted something that I knew I would be able to do accurately. I did still have to freehand some areas like the stars, the border design, and the finer details, but the projector took care of a lot of the bigger work and hard thinking for me. At this point, I was all set up and ready for the sun to set. I kept peeking out, waiting until it got dark enough to be able to see the projection image. I was so ready to begin. Nice.
I feel like it's gonna be like really tiny up in here, and I'm gonna have to probably like.
Yeah, the only duck out of the way.
Yeah, the only thing that's gonna suck is your arm shadows.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are tiny. I like imagine the wall as being a lot bigger.
Do you need brushes?
No, I got brushes.
Like tiny brushes?
I mean,
I'll get you
got,
tiny brushes.
like this is my smallest brush. Which,
I'll get you a tiny brush.
well, it's house paint though. I don't want to ruin any good brushes.
Oh, I don't care.
Yeah, shit. I did not realize how small that would be. Like all of this shit in here.
Right.
God, yeah, I had no idea. Well, now I know for next time.
It took some finagling to get the image into the exact right position on the wall, but once it was in place, it was pretty easy to work around and keep my arms and body out of the light. I had my iPad plugged into the projector to cast the image and just set the iPad on top of the projector. Thankfully, even when the iPad turned off, the projector kept casting the image, which was really handy. You can see at this point that the bright white areas were where I had applied paint, and the more tan areas was just the light projection. I started with the moon first to get a feel for using the paint and my tools, and then started to work on the cactus since it had so much detail. Then I started on the scorpion and blocking in his little lumpy body. And finally, the tarantula. At this point, I think it was around 10 p.m. My goal was to stop at midnight so I could get enough sleep for the next day. So at this point, I really stopped worrying about packing white into every little crevice of the stucco masonry wall and just making sure that the next day I would be able to tell where I put paint and where I needed to add the black. I brought 3 camera batteries with me for this, and shortly after this clip, the last one had officially died, but I was able to finish blocking in the border and getting at least a path for the stars in place. Apparently, batteries die super fast in the cold. Good to know. Day 2. So now with coffee in hand, I began the second day of work. It took about 5 hours the night before to get all of the white blocked onto the wall. Not too bad. Here I'm just adding in more white to make it more vibrant and less patchy. The walls were so textured that I had to really pack and push paint into the crevices to get it vibrant from a distance. It's a little hard to tell until after the white is packed in how patchy it was until I did that. Thankfully, this paint dries really fast, so I could add layers pretty quickly. We're on day 2 of the mural process. Last night I stayed up until midnight blocking in all of this as much as possible to be able to get the shape so I could just work in the daylight today. Need to do all of the hairs around the little spider, fill that in. Once I get the black patched in there, clean up some of these spots where it's like a little patchy. It's not as like packed in. You can't really see it at a distance, but it bothers me. And like all of the patchiness in there, which is like mostly blocked in at this point. And I did pretty good on the scorpion, so I don't really need to do a whole lot of touch-ups there, but I gotta do all the little spines. Probably go over it in black and then put white on top of it from there and correct. The line got a little bit wonky, just kind of clean everything up, put in all the black behind it, and we're good. I had originally bought some 9-inch rollers to add black to these areas, but my brain doesn't know how to visualize sizes, and an 11-foot by 5-foot mural wall is a lot smaller than you might think it is. But suffice it to say, I didn't need the 9-inch rollers and instead borrowed some 4-inch rollers instead, which worked really well for going around the little stars and details on my 4 subjects. I was able to get pretty close to each of the white areas with this. Because of the spongy texture of the rollers, the paint also went into the crevices a lot better than with the brush, so I think this saved me a ton of time. In hindsight, now that I know how quickly this paint dries compared to the 24 to 48 hours that it says on the can, I would have just painted the entire wall black in the afternoon when I got there and then went in with the white at night. I would have been done so much sooner if I would have known that ahead of time. Also, in hindsight, this is the point that I probably should have put on more sunscreen. My hands ended up getting so burnt from being in direct Arizona sunlight, even in the early spring, and still suffering from that a little bit today. Here we skip ahead to the early afternoon. I decided that trying to paint around the little stars was a huge pain, and that I would just take a new roller and just block in the entire sky black and freehand the stars on top of it after. I'm so glad that I did this because otherwise it would have taken so much more time. I wasn't originally planning to paint the top of these bricks black, but I made a little oops with my roller and ended up having to just paint the whole thing. It was only 80 degrees, but in the Arizona sun and next to a hot brick wall, it felt like 100. I was so ready for the sun to go down and to be cold again. The sun finally went down and I was doing so much better physically and mentally without the heat soaking into every fiber of my being. I was able to edge in around the moon, the tarantula, and most of the cactus, so now it was just finishing up everything else. Since I was recording throughout the day, my camera batteries died really quickly at night, so we're going to fast forward to the last day of touch-ups. The neighbors were doing some leaf blowing here, so I'll spare you all that noise and do a little voiceover of the progress. By the end of the night, I had finished adding the black around all of the characters, adding the black detail inside of each of them, and blocking in the stars. My plan for the day was to ultimately finish, but specifically to add in the white details, fix the stars, clean up the border, and do any touch-ups that I needed. I didn't get a great shot of it, but I wasn't a fan of the way the stars flowed across the wall at the beginning of day 3. I think I was just too tired at night to care about getting it in exactly right placement, that I just kind of globbed on the stars and didn't stand back enough to look at it as a whole and really take the time to make sure the flow made sense. So today I wanted to make sure I did that, added some dots, removed some others, step back, check it, and keep tweaking until it looked how I wanted it to. So while editing the final video, I realized that I am not a professional YouTuber and I forgot to film any kind of content after the reveal to be able to go over any lessons learned, anything like that. So you get me on my couch with some coffee and we'll go over it together. So I definitely learned that I needed a lot more supplies than what I had planned to bring. I had meticulously made a list of everything that I could possibly need for a mural, and then showed up at the site and realized that there's some things that would have been nice to have. I think one of those things, I had brought a roller pan, which would have worked fine, but I didn't realize how tired I would be at midnight wrapping up from painting for 7 to 12 hours that day, and how much I would not want to clean up anything in my space. So I think it would have been really handy to have some kind of like roller tray that was like those steel ones that have the liner inserts so that you can just throw the liner away instead of having to clean out the tray so that you can reuse it next time. I hate the waste from an environmental perspective, but from a sanity and mental perspective, I think it would have been very handy. I also realized that to use the rollers, I had bought 9-inch rollers and a 9-inch tray that would fit them. But in order to go around all the little details, I would have probably needed like a 4-inch roller instead. Luckily, the patrons customers that were commissioning this mural had those and let me borrow them. You can't really use them again after you use the rollers because they get so caked with paint. Also didn't know that. So having the 4-inch rollers worked a lot better than I think the 9-inch rollers would have had. I really underestimated how small an 11 by 5 foot mural space is. You think it sounds huge, but when you're getting in on those details, it's a lot smaller than you think it would be. Another thing that would have been nice to have is they have these buckets at Home Depot that have little handles, and they also have liners, and they also have little magnets where your paintbrush metal can stick to it so it stays out of the paint and you don't have to just chuck it back in there. That would have been a wise investment. Instead, I had just taken some of our old like recycled containers before we took them to the recycling center, little plastic containers from tofu or whatever, and brought those, and those were going to be my little paint cup holders. And definitely opt for the $10 fancy buckets with the liners, because the liners will make cleanup a lot easier and you won't have to wash them out. I also didn't realize how tired I would be at midnight and how much I would not want to wash brushes at midnight. So I soaked them in water instead so that I can wash them the next day. I also didn't think about any kind of supplies for actually washing the brushes. I definitely will need to think about a better way to clean brushes in the future that is more eco-friendly, because just dumping paint, I don't like that, and I don't really honestly know the proper way of disposing of paint. So if anybody knows, I'd love to know how you dispose of your acrylic paints properly after they're on brushes and have been used, because it's environmentally concerning. I know I wrote down other things. Oh, painter's tape to be able to make straight lines. That would have been really handy instead of having to just eyeball and freehand everything myself. Acrylic and mixed media brushes that are in smaller sizes. I had a 1-inch angled brush, a 2-inch flat brush, a 3-inch flat brush, and a 2-inch angled brush, and they were not small enough to do all of the little details that I was trying to do. So thankfully I was able to get my hands on some smaller actual acrylic mixed media art brushes, and I think I would just buy those in the future to be able to do all the fine details and get into the little nooks and crannies of what I was trying to do. A light would have been very handy to work on at night. Oh, also because it's Arizona, next time I would definitely want a big sun hat and some kind of like rag that I could wet and put around my neck to try to like keep my body cooler. I did bring sunblock, so I did think about that, but a hat would be very helpful. I also learned that the paint itself dries very quickly. On the paint cans it said that it would take 24 to 48 hours to dry. In the Arizona heat, that was not the case. It took maybe like a couple hours to dry. Definitely dried a lot faster than I thought. Because of that, it would have been a lot easier for me to have gone over the entire thing with a roller in black first and then go back with white on top of it using the projector, instead of doing the white projector pieces first and then going back in around everything with black. I didn't think that the white, for one, would go over the black super well, and that I'd have to do like multiple coats before the opacity really built up. And that was also not the case. It was very easy to go over the black with the white. So I don't know if I just bought good quality paint or if that's just standard because of the latex in it. Maybe it creates like a barrier that regular acrylic paint that you would use on canvas doesn't really have. But yeah, that would have saved me a ton of time. I think it would have maybe cut a day off of the final time that it took me to do the mural. Camera batteries also die very quickly in the cold. My camera batteries were dying super quickly once it got to be like 10 p.m. and it was really starting to get to the lows in the nighttime temperatures. Definitely bring multiple camera batteries if you're going to be recording at night and it's a little chilly. Overall, the painting work took me about 15 to 20 hours of actually painting. That's not including setup, takedown, actually designing. So just painting, it was probably like 15 to 20 hours. Definitely a lot bigger than I've ever worked before. Usually I work at a max of like 16 by 20 inches, and this was an 11 foot by 5 foot mural. So this is by far the biggest thing that I've ever made by myself. Thanks everyone for watching this video and joining me on my journey with making my first mural. I hope it's helpful for you. I wanted to record this partially to document my process, but also because when I was researching how to paint a mural, there was a lot of videos that showed their process, but not really all of the like thought that went into doing the mural before actually getting out to paint the mural. But for anybody trying to do a small scale mural for the first time, I wanted to provide some kind of resource based on what I had learned from the process. If you have any questions about my process, leave them in the comments below. I'll put the specific materials that I use in the description and any other important details that I might have missed. Okay, bye.